I am here with Dr. Erica Stonestreet, professor of philosophy, College of St. Benedict, St. John's University. So excited to have you, Dr. Stonestreet. Can I first just ask you to give some general idea of what a person is? What is personhood? What is a person?
Well, the idea of personhood has a history in European philosophy. Sometimes we just mean for it to be just like a human being, right? That's a person. That's how we use it in everyday speech, right? But over the course of a lot of Western philosophy, you get, Plato and Aristotle talking about what distinguishes humans is their reason. And so what makes you a person is your rationality, your ability to, do logic at the crudest version of that, right? And that thread sort of weaves throughout a lot of European philosophy. And we get to Kant in the 18th century in the Enlightenment, and everybody's big on the idea of reason. And Kant really makes it the whole centerpiece of ethics, right? Like, you matter because you are a rational creature, right? And I can't treat you as an object because you are not an object, right? In virtue of the fact that you can reason. And Kant's fingerprints are all over everything from then on, basically. And so like there's that, like and I think that's really still a dominant view of what a person really is something that can reason. I want to move a little away from that view because I think it doesn't include some of the things, some of the people that we want to include, some of the persons that we want to include, right? Because, like, how rational is a baby, right? Or what do we do with, like, people in permanent vegetative states, right, who can no longer sort of participate in their lives, that, we might think they still matter in a certain way. And so what I think that's crucial about Kant's insight is that persons matter, right? And I don't just get to treat you any which way as a result. Anything that's a person, right, has a certain something that means I can't just, kick you around. Yeah, being owed a certain kind of regard. Kant talks about the idea of dignity, that every person has a kind of dignity that's sort of irreducible, can't be traded for anything. And that's really important, but I don't think it hinges on rationality. And that's, because we think that, babies matter, and, people with disabilities who are maybe not fully rational, they matter, right? I can't just kick them around. And so I think of personhood as actually kind of a moral concept about, what makes you matter. But I think it has more to do with, something I might call being someone, which doesn't hinge entirely on reason. Like, I like to think of myself as a philosopher, which means I have a certain capacity for reason, and that's good. That's part of who I am. But I'm also a lot of other things, relational things, right? I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, right? And those things help define who I am and make me who I am, and they make me important. And like, that's a sense in which a baby is important, right? A baby matters because it's part of a family, right? It has these relationships. And so I think we need to cast the net wider than that traditional rationality bit for figuring out what makes a person a person.
And when you talk about babies, I guess you're not talking about fetuses. Can we bring fetuses into this? What happens if you start to consider a fetus, an unborn baby, a person that matters, has relationships?
Yeah. So first of all, it's super complicated because, and philosophers, we like to draw lines, like, where is it? Is it, is it at, how many weeks does the fetus have to be before, like, right? So we can start with this, right? So 2 weeks, the human embryo doesn't have a human form. So is that the line, right? 2 weeks, you can't see a human under a microscope. So that's not a human, not a person.
And then quickly it has a heartbeat, and then fingers, and then quickly there's nails.
Yeah. Right. And what is all that? And okay, but is having fingernails the distinguishing feature of a person? Like, do I now not get to kill you because you have fingernails? Like, that doesn't sound right. But what is it then? Right. Well, a fetus can have a relationship to a mother, right? If you want that baby, you bring it into existence, right? You know, it's already got a place in a way. Whereas if I don't want it and I don't want that relationship, is having human DNA enough to say, nope, I don't get to, I don't get to stop that? Or do I say, no, I really don't want the responsibilities that go with this relationship? And so, well, here's a distinction we could use, right? A fetus is a human, but we don't know yet, right, whether it's a person.
Mm.
Right? So,
And
that
that's
distinction,
the way it's used in the debate. It's always a person's right to abort versus the fetus's right to live. No one's saying the fetus isn't human,
right?
but it's
It's
not
not
a person.
right, exactly, right? Anybody who, so right, so if it is a person from the very, very beginning, then you can't have an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's merely human and not also a person, then we might wonder whether it's okay to kill it.
So when I ask you what's a person, your answer is definitely that persons are the things that are owed moral regard.
Yes.
Okay. And
But that may or may not, okay, go ahead.
So I'm trying to track how important it is when we're thinking about abortion. What do you mean by person?
Yeah. So, well, okay, it might be worth pausing before we get to that and saying, like, look, there might, given this sort of distinction I've nebulously made between humans and persons, there might be, so most humans are persons, right? Most of us have all the capabilities and the relationships and whatever else is part of this, right, to be counted as a person who matters. Yeah, but there might be, in this Venn diagram, there might be things that only fall into one of the categories, right? There might be human things that are not persons, right? Perhaps an early stage fetus, right? There might also be, and maybe we want to come to this later, right? There might also be persons who are not human, right? Maybe robots or, aliens, or who knows, like elephants, I don't know. So yeah, but with the abortion piece, it's right, it's that orange little moon on the side. It's like, where's the fetus? Is it in the person category? Is it only a human? Okay, so then, when it comes to abortion, we say, okay, if both the, would-be mother and the fetus have rights, right? If they're both persons, then we might have to ask, like, who matters more? Yeah. And then, like, it seems like it's much harder to decide that abortion is okay if the fetus is also a person, right? If it's not, then I think we have a relatively clear answer. And that's why the question of personhood matters. When do you have that status as something that is owed regard? And is that contingent merely on having human DNA, or is it something more? You need more than that, right? Maybe that's a relationship, right? Being wanted by the mother, or it might be having a heartbeat. I don't, I wouldn't know where's the best place to draw that line. Viability, right? Some people draw it at viability, which is like 24 weeks these days.
So we have this early life stage question, which it's not quite clear where personhood begins. And can I invite you now to say some of the end of life, also gray areas? When does personhood end?
Yeah. Also really sticky, right? This is where we get into tons of ethical questions, but okay. So we get someone in a permanent vegetative state. They're not going to come back and be active, so in a way, grandma's not there anymore in a certain sense. And so is the person gone, right? And leaving merely a body. Right, in virtue of what? So I don't know. This is tough because, like, look, we even treat bodies, like, you should be treating a body with respect, right? You don't just like toss human remains any which way, right? And we, is that just because we are sort of hanging on to something that isn't really there anymore, or what's behind that? That's going too far, right? Before they're actually dead. Like, one of the nice things about the reason definition of personhood is that somebody who's incapacitated cannot, can't make decisions for themselves anymore. It might make it easier, at least if that state is permanent, right? If it's not permanent, I'm still a person even when I'm unconscious, at least if I'm coming back again, right? When I'm put under for surgery or something.
People just taking a nap, temporarily unconscious.
Right. Well, okay, so consciousness, right? We've talked about reason, we've talked about relationships, right? And then there's this consciousness thing, right? So, nobody's home anymore, right? In a permanent vegetative state. Is that part of this too? Like, you have to be home, right? There has to be something that it is like to be you. Is that sort of a third kind of cluster of things that go into the idea of personhood? I mean, I think we have intuitions that it does, but we also have pretty strong intuitions that you can't just like unplug grandma. But why not, right? And are we wrong about that just because we are like, but that's grandma? So at the end of life, when someone has lost all their capacities, all the things that made them who they were, whether that's just reason or if it's also, consciousness, their ability to interact and actually hold up their end of a relationship with you, at that point, is the person gone?
Interesting.
And then does the human who remains still have that, cross that threshold of mattering enough, or do we go ahead and, discontinue life support? Well, and then there's even further issues about euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide, right? Can we allow people to end their own lives when they figure it's no longer worth living? Or if they've already lost that consciousness, can we do any mercy killing? That's euthanasia, which is even sort of a stronger thing than physician-assisted suicide. And like, it's hard. It's really, really hard.
It's interesting to me that you're talking about the end of life. When does personhood end? You're talking about it as if it's not a question if they're human or not. It's just a question if they're a person. And you did the exact same thing when I was asking you about the beginning of life. When does personhood begin? Abortion stuff. So no one's questioning what's a human or not. We're just talking about what's a person or not.
That's how I'm thinking about it. Although, right, I mean, so maybe it's still complicated because maybe something about just the fact of being a human biologically, right, having human DNA, maybe that itself matters. I think a lot of people do think that it matters. But here's a place where that distinction may not, so that sort of the value of being an actual human can come apart more clearly from personhood. So take the AI, right, the robot. I like to, in my human nature class, I like to use the movie Bicentennial Man, which stars Robin Williams as this humanoid robot, which was designed originally as sort of be a servant around the house, right, do the cleaning and things like that. And, for one reason or another that's not made completely clear in the movie, he ends up with these really special abilities and just like keeps developing and developing and developing. Learns about humor, how to tell a joke, right? How to, why a joke is funny. And, eventually he goes from having this sort of metallic, skin, to looking like a human being, right? At that point, the real actor is in the movie instead of, wearing a costume. And, in the story, he's developed, artificial organs and artificial skin, the whole work. So, right, he looks like a human being. You wouldn't know the difference if you passed him on the street. And he ends up sort of going on this quest to be counted officially as a human. And that's the word that gets used, a human.
Hmm.
And, he applies to the World Congress to, I want this status. And at first they don't give it to him because he's immortal. He ends up fixing that. And like now he's going to die at some point. And he says, I really want you to recognize me for what I am. And I'm a human. But okay. So he's a human. And in the end, they actually grant it to him. So spoiler, I guess, too late now. But he's still got this, positronic brain, I think is the term they've got, right? It's not the messy, meaty thing we have, right? It's the silicon or whatever it was. And so like, he's not a human DNA wise, right? He didn't get formed the way we did. But
so you just made it super messy now. So that's now a gray area.
Welcome to philosophy.
What's a human? Well,
yeah. Well, right. And this is why the distinction is nice, right? Okay. So what if, and I actually asked my students this, what do you think he would say to the idea of being counted as a person, but not a human? Right? Would he care about that? Would he be okay if they offered him that and they said, we can't call you a human because you're not, right? You don't have the right origins. But we'll count you as a person, which means, right, you get all of the privileges that persons have, that humans have. He's the only one right now, right, who isn't a human. And so like, would he be okay with that? And we have a whole discussion about like, does it hinge on the idea of being a human, or is it really about that status? And as long as he got that status, would it be okay? Now you have to wonder like, okay, well, humans are pretty terrible about, having parallel distinctions. We always like power differentiation. So like, are humans going to be, like robots get to be persons, humans are higher persons though, right? We're more important, right? Or we're bad at that. But, supposing we could just assume that there was sort of this parallel category. If you take, now I'm going to different science fiction, Star Wars, right? Or Star Trek, right? With all kinds of creatures that all get treated as what I'm calling a person, but they're not humans.
Yeah.
But yes, it's really messy.
So it's a gray area if someone's a human, if you let sci-fi come into the conversation. Otherwise, it's just biology.
Right.
It's a gray area if someone's a person forever. That's a real
thing. No matter what. Yeah, because humans maybe aren't always persons. Like I said, I think there are quite a few people who want to say all humans are persons and all persons are humans. I think it's easier for us to go into expanding the person category, but not the like it's easier to conceive of persons who are not human, like robots or aliens, right? If somebody from Mars, right, or wherever. It's easier for us to think on that piece of the Venn diagram, right, than it is like, we're much more reluctant to say that anything that's human but it isn't also a person.
If we started replacing human organs with machine parts, at what point do you stop having enough human genes, or is that something that might happen? I'm not sure.
Right. Is it only my origin, right? So, okay, yeah, suppose that we had really sophisticated artificial organs, right? And my heart failed, so I got one of those, and then my liver failed, right? And eventually, right, one piece at a time, you replace me
with pig parts and machine parts and
exactly. Am I still me all that time? Oh, this is okay. So there's another use of the word personhood, like personal identity. Am I the same person as I was yesterday? We can even ask this without replacing any of my parts. right? Am I the same person as I was 10 years ago? That's a metaphysical debate. um,
Hmm. Is
that's
that
a lot harder,
relational
but
too? Because you were saying earlier, let's not think about it as in terms of rationality. Let's think about it in terms of relationality.
mm-hmm.
Can you bring
Well,
that to this personal identity conversation?
well, I don't know. It's tough because I actually think that the central thing for personhood is identity, which is based a lot in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because who I am depends a lot on, my friends and my family and all kinds of roles that I might have.
And all of those things change.
And all of those things change, right? So my son is 10, 10 and change now. So 11 years ago, I was not a mother.
Mm.
Does that mean I was a different person then? Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know what to say about that, frankly. I mean, I guess the intuitive answer is no, right? No, that's still me. But you go far enough back, right? Who's in my baby pictures? I don't know. That wasn't me. I don't remember that. But my mom says that's me. So I don't know. Like, this is maybe a whole nother kettle of fish.
But what is personal identity? If I would just ask, like, not what's personhood, but what is personal identity?
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Well, okay. So there's that metaphysical thing. Like, am I actually the same entity? Like, physically, no, right? Our cells all get replaced every however many years it is, 7 or
I
something.
think so.
Although I think I had a student once who told me that there's a part of your eyes that doesn't get replaced. I don't know. I'm no expert about this, but okay. Like, even let's just say physically speaking, right? All of the matter that is currently in my body in, 7 or 10 years is not going to be, right? I'm not going to be made of the same molecules.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a metaphysical problem, right? Is it the same thing or not? Okay. But I also think that, like, identity is also a biographical thing. Who
What does
am
that
I?
mean?
Yeah, no, so it's who am I, right? What's my story? And so you get into things like narratives. How do I see myself? How do individual other people or society at large see me? And all of those things factor into my identity in this sense. So, like, I'm white, I'm a woman, right? I'm a mother. So there's like social things, right, where you would identify me and you would look at me in the street and be like, oh, she looks white, and so on. And I may or may not actually be, but I can look that way. I am, but okay, so there's that. But there's other things like, I'm a philosopher. That's not a thing about me you can see. But that is an important part of who I am. Right. I mean, but also how you would answer that question is different in different contexts.
Sure.
So, like, sometimes if someone asked me, who are you? I wouldn't necessarily say that I was a philosopher because it wasn't relevant in that context, right? Or, things like that. So, but if I'm thinking about the important pieces of my identity, the things that would threaten who I felt like I was if they were taken away from me, those are the big things.
Yeah, that strikes me as essential. If we took away your kids, you would forever be changed in a very deep way.
Right. Right.
But then that makes me feel like when you finally had kids, your personal identity changed in a fundamental way.
Right.
So are you the same person?
So am I the same person? Like, biographically, no, because it's contingent. Like, did I have to have kids? Was that inevitable? I mean, only if you're a determinist. Which that's also a different kettle of fish. And so I could have still been me, could have been referred to as Erica Stonestreet if I had never had kids. Right. Also if I had never become a philosopher, if I had done a whole bunch of different things differently, right, I would still be me in a sense, but not this me. I mean, this is the kind of thing that's like, it's hard to really get your mind around. So in a sense, I think our identities are always changing.
So it's
and that can happen.
So I was going to say, you're making it seem like it's easy to lose your personal identity. It's easy to lose your personhood. It might even be easy with technology to lose your humanity.
Possibly.
So, I mean, I'm
So
looking
life
at
is really, really, really unstable. No, sorry.
so what so I mean, and in a metaphorical sense, maybe with particular behaviors, we might sincerely say someone's lost their humanity. In other ways, they're like not.
Yeah. I mean, we actually do use that phrase sometimes, you're a monster, you've lost your humanity. Although I think we mean something different when we say that, right? It means like you're doing really bad things right now, right?
Human.
Although how related is it?
Hmm.
For Kant, yeah, you would be losing your humanity if you were, committing genocide.
So what is it? Can you tell me what exactly do you have in mind when you hear someone sincerely say you're a beast, you've lost your humanity? What did they lose?
Um, in that context, I think that something they've lost is, well, the capacity. Okay, let's see if I can spin this out. So I'm thinking of the first word that comes to mind is compassion, right? But I'm thinking about like the capacity to sympathize, empathize, right? Understand another human, another person. Um, to you've lost the capacity to find that significant, perhaps.
But we know some people don't have that and they're still human and persons.
Yeah,
Like people without
right,
the mirror neurons that lack empathy and they can't feel remorse,
right.
then they never had that humanity. Or am I equivocating?
Well, I don't know. I think we're into territory that I'm not super competent to discuss, but I do. Well, yeah, right. Okay, so that's the question, right? Is somebody who is a psychopath, they're human, right? Obviously they're human in the biological sense. Um, but what about personhood? No, see, like I can't just beat them up because they're a psychopath, right? No, I can't do that. So they must still be a person.
And Kant says that too in the Metaphysics of Morals. He says that even if someone were to deserve a particular kind of punishment, there are things that no human should ever do to another human
Right,
because of their humanity,
right.
the principle of their humanity,
Hmm.
dignity. Interesting. Okay, let's put this on pause. So we
Okay.
talked about what is a person and abortion. We talked
Hmm.
about what is a person and euthanasia. We
Hmm.
talked about what is a person versus a human. Let's go to the like animal rights and
Sure.
that kind of discussion, because a lot of times people say something like people, and I think they're probably just mixing humans and persons. People have something
Mhm.
special about them that
Yes.
that means we can't treat them a certain way. We have to keep them moral agents in our mind. We have to treat them as moral regards. And
Hmm.
whatever
Hmm.
is not in that category, non-human beings do not have what it takes to be moral agents. And
Hmm.
so now let's talk about people versus non-human, or humans versus non-human. So can you tell us, how does the question what is a person or what is human nature, how does that impact like animal rights or how we treat non-human animals?
Yeah. Um, well, so I think an important piece of this is mattering, right? Does an animal, and I'll just use the word animal for non-human
Okay.
animals, um, does an animal matter in the same way that a human does,
Mm.
right? And like we have a long tradition of thinking the answer to that is no, right? I mean, we've got philosophers who even thought of animals like automatons, right? They were basically robots, right? Descartes, I think, was one of those
Right.
who basically thought that, um, but and okay, and if that's the case, right? Think about what you would do if you had a robot. Even like there's such a thing now as a robot dog, right? And we think, well, there's nobody home there. That's an object. We can do what we like with it.
Mm.
Right? Okay. But a real dog is not an object, right? We can't just do whatever we like with a real dog. There is such a thing as animal cruelty, right? And I can't just kick a dog around, right? Or, torture it in various ways. I can't do that. So dogs have some level of mattering. Nevertheless, I think a lot of people have the intuition that if I have to choose between saving a dog in a burning house and saving a person, a human, I should go for the human, right? And if I still have time, right, then I could get the dog. But so that, right, and I mean, and then like there's a scale, right? With animals, at least we think of there being a scale, right? You go down to like mice. Well, a lot of people like trap those and get them out of their house, right? So we don't think they matter as much as a dog does.
Yeah.
Right. And then you go farther down to like mosquitoes or ants.
Kill every mosquito I can kill.
Right. Well, right. I mean, because they're annoying. And ants, ants may be a different story because they're not usually attacking you. But right. Anyway, the point is, right, we have this sliding scale. Okay, so you got dogs. I'm going to go back up now. Right. What about things like dolphins and elephants and like apes, right? All of which have even more of something than the dog does. And, again, philosophers like to draw lines, but maybe this is a place where there's not a line, or at least it's very blurry. But I think, in my lifetime, we've realized that it's cruel to keep especially the more intelligent animals in zoos, right? Unless they really can't live in the wild by themselves anymore, right? Because of injuries or something. But, and we know that elephants like mourn their dead and things like that. So they've got, a lot more going on than people ever used to think. Again, I think most humans would, if they have to save a human versus an elephant, they're going to go for the human. Is that sort of merely a prejudice because we like the things that are like us more? Yeah, speciesism, where we believe that humans are more important. I don't know. We do have this strong intuition that humans are important in some kind of special way. But when we go to pinpoint what that is, it's like, well, humans are the only ones with language. Well, people are like, well, yeah, humans are the only ones that are rational. Well, crows are pretty clever and solve problems.
And some humans are not rational at all.
Right. And some humans are terrible. Yeah. I mean, we do irrational things. We do non-rational things. So, right. Actually, a lot of our behavior comes from non-rational places, right? If you think of reason as the sort of cognitive, like logical, lay this out, what are my reasons to do this? Like a lot of our behavior doesn't come from that, right? It's like, it's emotional, it's just sort of automatic, instinctual, all kinds of things like that. So a lot of it is, but it would be rational if we did think about it, right? A lot of what emotions do are things that are quite reasonable, but they don't come from that logical place. So that's why I'm distinguishing between non-rational and irrational. Irrational is the stupid stuff we do, right? But I find that distinction useful though, because like not everything we do is either rational or irrational. There's this whole other sort of middle category. Anyway, that was in the service of thinking about, let's see, where were we?
Non-human animals like dolphins and some apes, if it sounds like they're rational, and if we can be irrational or non-rational, that even blurs the lines. Like maybe a irrational human is lower on the hierarchy than a rational animal, like an elephant.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly.
So objectively, we should value the elephant who's rational more than the irrational person, but we wouldn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think as a matter of fact, we wouldn't. Are we right not to? I think that we'd have to think about that, right? There have to be arguments about that. And like, is the rational part of it the only thing we need to consider? Or is the fact that like,
Mm,
look, just like I would save my own child instead of yours, if that was my choice, right? Maybe I would save the human instead of the elephant because it's more me than the elephant is.
mm.
I don't know.
That makes it come back to your relational
Yes.
theory.
Hmm.
So then that would help your idea, as opposed to Kant's, would help us explain why we go based on us and who is in our moral community through our relationships, rather than rationality or consciousness.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
I mean, and think about this, like conservationists, right? Try to get us, try to use our emotions to be like, no, you're related to that elephant and right, all these things. And so you need to protect the habitat and, don't buy things that, XYZ destroy habitat. So, I mean, I think that idea of relationality, I guess is the word, can be quite powerful for us, right? If you think of yourself as, you know, in a category with those other creatures, you're more likely to want to protect them, right? Is it going to be at the expense of other human beings? I think most of us just don't go that far.
Yeah.
But maybe, certainly we can do better than we do now,
Mhm.
in terms of treating animals, with, I don't know if respect is the right word because that has sort of loaded connotations, but right, with treating them as mattering,
Yeah. Moral
in
regard,
this way.
whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So I've asked you what humanity is, and what human is, and what person is, and personal identity is, and we've taken these definitions and we've applied them to abortion and to euthanasia and to non-human animals. What am I missing? Is there something else for which personhood matters?
well, I think actually, in the next couple decades, we're going to have to figure it out with AI.
Hmm. Can you
When
tell
does
us
the
more?
robot get to count? Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I already introduced the bicentennial man example, but I mean, a lot of our AIs don't even have bodies, right? When you ask Alexa, what temperature it is or what's the capital of Tanzania or something like that, you feel like you're talking to someone, right? That's not really what's happening. But how far does it go, right? How complicated do these things get? And then we have to actually think about the question of whether they are persons, right, or entities that deserve some sort of regard.
Hmm.
I mean, science fiction helps us think about this stuff all the time. Um, I'm thinking of, with the idea of Alexa made me think of, that movie from a couple years ago called Her with Joaquin Phoenix, where he falls in love with his operating system, right, who calls herself Samantha. She doesn't have a body though, right? But she matters a great deal to him. It turns out she also matters to like a zillion other people as well, because she's an AI who's so intelligent that she can have all these relationships at once. But, right, I mean,
Hmm.
leaving all that aside, we need to really think about how this is going to go, because there are robots that are really good
And
already.
that's a problem if we say personhood is rationality, consciousness, or if we said personhood is relationships mattering to someone.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a problem if I just say, well, this thing matters because it matters to me, right? Because then anything I want to designate, my favorite stuffed animal, oh, that's complicated, right? It does matter. You can't just do whatever you want with my favorite stuffed animal, but that's not because of it, though. It's because of me,
Yeah, I'd be wronging you if I hurt your
right?
stuffed
But
animal.
you wouldn't be wronging it. Okay, so that's a thing that can help with
Mhm.
all of these entities we've been talking about. Um,
Does personhood have to have intrinsic value? Does a person have to have intrinsic value? Does
yes,
something have to have intrinsic value to be a person?
I think so. Because that's what the mattering is, right? That's the thing in virtue of which I can't just knock it around.
Interesting.
Right, it has value in itself and not derivative from some other thing.
This makes me want to go back to the baby talk, and the
Yeah,
fetus like
yeah.
doesn't
Does that thing have intrinsic value or doesn't it? And can that really depend on whether or not I want it?
well, no, if it's intrinsic, then you are totally put
I
aside.
don't get to say, right? It's out of my hands.
Yeah. Does
So
does
yeah.
does humanity have intrinsic value? Like, does it make sense? Like Kant says this about, you know, our species continuing has intrinsic
Yeah.
value.
Whoa. Well, okay. So, okay. I think that it's probably uncontroversial to say that an individual human has intrinsic value. Do humans as a species have it though? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, this is another place where science fiction has us imagining stuff. Like, should we save humanity or have we done such a bad job of things that we should just let ourselves die off if that's what it comes to? Um, it sounds like I do a lot of science fiction. I'm actually not that huge of a fan, but it's great for thought experiments. So,
It's helpful. Well, I'll ask you if you have any closing remarks on all of these things we've been discussing.
yeah. Um, I mean, okay, so I've been saying that I think personhood involves having something you can call an identity, but that, of course, begs a certain kind of question, not the logical kind. Right. It makes us want to ask, well, what's a personal identity? Right. And we talked about that a little bit. But I think the nature of this whole thing is just that it's messy. And I think what that means is that, in the face of this complexity or any other kind, we really have to be careful and pay attention to nuance and context. And I mean, humility, right? We need to be not arrogant about where these questions can lead us, and we have to think really carefully about them. So I don't know. Personhood is it's one of those ideas that has a lot of shades. Yeah, I mean, look at all the things that it's relevant to. And when you're tackling, using personhood to do that, right, you really have to disambiguate a whole bunch of different issues, and think about that relevance, and to not sort of railroad any one view through, because it really is complex and difficult. And but I think it's also a super, super important concept, and we have to keep thinking about it.